Hey, Aaron Chambers here. I want to welcome you to episode 33 of Enjoy the Journey with Aaron Chambers. I'm so excited for you to listen to this episode. If you like my podcast, would you please give it a thumbs up, give it 5 stars, give it a good review, subscribe to it, let your friends know about it. Episodes like today are why I'm so excited to be able to share stuff like this with you on my podcast, because today's episode is just a wonderful conversation I have with about 25 pastors from all over the country. I was honored with my friend Angel Flores to begin a network about 4 years ago called the Connect Leadership Network. We got together initially to write sermons together, but that collaboration grew to a time of coaching and soul care as well. So we now focus on coaching, soul care, and collaboration. We meet every week on Zoom from 8:30 to 10 Mountain Daylight Time. It's free. It's open to anybody. So if you're interested in that, I'll have some contact information here where you can reach out and find out more information about joining us if you're a pastor. But this conversation today is just kind of a glimpse to what we do every week. What I did is essentially just record our session this morning. Now normally we record these, but they're private, and they're so we can go over the sermon notes together. We can remember wisdom we heard, but we're sharing it with the world today because it's an insightful conversation with pastors of churches all over the country and how we have been dealing with COVID, how we deal with the challenges we're facing, dreams we have for the church. It's just a really great conversation, and I'm so glad to be able to share it with you because I love these people. These men and women are my family, and we've spent an hour and a half together every week for 4 years, and we've gotten together here in Colorado several times. We couldn't this year because of COVID, but the Connect Leadership Network is what it is. It's a network of pastors, and we get together for this blessing every single week, and it's a brotherhood, a sisterhood. And what you're going to hear today is the heart and soul of pastors, real pastors. And I pray that it's a blessing to you. I pray that it encourages you. And I really do pray that today this conversation will help you to understand and maybe love your pastor a little bit more. And if you're a pastor, I pray this conversation will encourage you to know that you're not alone. All right. Hey, I'm glad to have you guys with us today for this version of my podcast. I'm really imposing on my friends here because the people you see on the screen, and if you're listening to this on audio, you're not seeing these people, so I'd encourage you to check it out on YouTube. But the men and women on this screen are my friends, are my brothers and sisters in Christ, and we're part of a ministry together called the Connect Leadership Network. And so this podcast today, I want to just kind of introduce you to this network, just because I love these people, and they are the highlight of my week, and it's an honor to be with them. So we're going to do today for this podcast is just kind of let you kind of sit in for a little bit on one of our sessions. We do these sessions every week, every Wednesday from 8:30 to 10-ish Mountain Daylight Time, which is God's time because he loves the mountains. And so, but these men and women you're going to hear from are pastors all over the country. We may even have somebody from Canada today, but we've had a pastor from Kenya join us once. And but anyway, these men and women are in the trenches serving the Lord. And so we're just going to have a conversation today about some things that I want to talk about with these people whom I love and trust. Let me just jump in first with Angel Flores is a part of this group. And Angel Flores and I founded this network several years ago. Angel, when was that? Do you have any idea?
I think it's 4 years.
4 years? I keep saying 3 years, but yeah. And a lot of us are kind of lamenting because we would normally be together this week. We have a gathering every January, and we're not together this year. But I'm looking makes next year even more appealing. Yeah. So about 4 years ago, Angel and I were both in a covenant group experience, which I can explain another time. But that was it was all about soul care, and so we were talking sometime after, or in the midst of our soul care, about this thing, and it kind of started off as just a vision to write sermons together, and now it's become this organic thing. Angel, talk a little about like, let's talk a little bit about how this got going.
So Aaron has a pretty good sized following on social media because he's an author, and so we put it out on social media. And I don't remember the exact number of churches that jumped in with us, but it was, I don't know, to my recollection, 50, something
Yeah,
like that.
it was a bunch.
And we did this. And then what we discovered, and this is kind of organic, was we started doing sermon collaboration. And at some point during those 8 weeks that we did that, people would jump in and say, hey, real quick, before we get off this Zoom call, it was a 1 hour a week Zoom call. Could I ask you a question about something I've got going on with my worship leader, my youth pastor, my elders? And we started doing some coaching. And then we started talking about soul care. How do you go the distance in ministry? Because it's fewer and fewer guys are retiring as ministers. We all know the drop off rate is like 90%. And so so by the end of the 8 weeks, many of us were like, let's not stop this. Let's keep this going. And so that was the origin of the Connect Leadership Network. And it's just a bunch of pastors who we are all leaning on one another. Things happen in this group that there's an immediate understanding of where everybody's at. As soon as people get on this call, it's all senior ministers, senior leaders. We all get it. We all understand the struggles, the challenges, the difficulties of raising pastors' kids, of pastoring, of dealing with boards and elders and staff and disgruntled people. And so immediately there's this kinship and this brotherhood that's just grown over the last 4 years.
Yep. And Angel and I like he said, we met 13 years ago. We came from different backgrounds, honestly, different theological tribes. And it's been interesting to see how God has molded us together. And he's my brother in Christ. And he's actually, as close as my brother. I consider him family. But yeah, this being with these men and women in this call is, it fills our soul. There's a quote. Do you guys remember the quote from Alan Algram about brothers when they're competitors? Or what's that quote? I think, Shan, do you remember it?
Tell me about your successes, and the likelihood is that we will become competitors. Tell me about your problems. Tell me about your burdens, and the likelihood is that we will become brothers.
Yeah, and that's what's happened in this group. Let me just throw it out there, you guys. I don't think I've ever asked this question. Why are you here? Like, why do you guys keep coming back?
For me, it's just being able to share with people who have similar circumstances. Because when you're leading your staff and you have a staff meeting, those are great. I love them, but it's a different dynamic because you're still the lead pastor and you have to answer to everything your staff does. And so here we can be free to talk about what we need to. We can just share with each other our struggles, not only our personal struggles, our family struggles, but just struggles in general with what we're having in the church. And everybody in this group understands and comes together and prays for each other and serves each other in a great way.
Yeah, one thing we point out too, that's a great point, Jeff. And one of the reasons we do come back is because we can have safe conversations with people who understand. And I'll tell you, we normally don't broadcast our conversations all over the world. So our conversations are sacred and they're safe. And we do record it for our purposes. Anybody who's in the network can go and watch the call to get, ideas, hear an idea again, hear a great thought again, get a quote again, get the sermon notes. But we do handle this as confidential, our time together. And so, Jeff, that's a great point, man. Like that this is a safe place we can talk to people who understand.
I know for me, I'm used to being in the Midwest where we have a high concentration of our churches in our brotherhood and the Bible colleges. And so I always had people I could kind of talk to and rely on and people I could lean on. And when I moved out to Arizona, that doesn't exist a whole lot. And with all the stresses and things that we deal with, it's really nice to come to a group of guys that, going back to what Jeff said, that you can feel safe, that you can share things. And I respect all you guys, and every one of us come from a little bit different backgrounds and a little bit different thought patterns. And so it's good to hear a different perspective, because sometimes there's things you guys mention, I thought, I really never thought of that. And I look at this as mentoring, training, encouragement, strengthening. And by the way, I miss our gathering. Last year was my first one, and it was just awesome.
Anyone else? Why do you keep coming back each week?
Yeah, I first came for the practical ideas, the practical help. But I think what keeps me coming back is the reminder that I'm not in this alone. There are weeks that go really bad and you're thinking, man, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And then I get on here and, oh man, what he's dealing with is worse than what I'm dealing with, or what they're dealing with is the same thing. And so it just, that brothers thing that Shan was quoting before, it's there. And I need that.
Aaron, I would add that there's hardly any other group that you could possibly look eye to eye with in this capacity of ministry. It's very different. If you grew up in the church, you knew what it was like to be someone in the pew, and if you were maybe a deacon or an elder, you understood what that was, some other capacity of ministry. But if you got into this, everything changes and shifts. And it's a balancing act, a constant trying to hold things together, purveying constant truths, maintaining relevancy, all of these things. And if someone is not walking in these shoes or have walked in these shoes, they're not going to get that. So coming into this group, I don't have to preface anything. It's already there.
What else?
Yeah, if I may add something, it's kind of a known thing in pastor circles that pastors don't have a lot of friends or a lot of close friends, or maybe that's just me. I don't know. But a lot of people feel uncomfortable being, friends with a senior pastor or pastor because, I don't know, they might feel like they'll be judged or whatever the case may be. And being a pastor can kind of be a really lonely profession. So it helps me just getting online and just having conversations with other pastors. A lot of times it's serious. Sometimes we joke around, just trying to take some of the pressure off of our jobs. But I just find it just a brotherhood. And even though we're not together, we're kind of all over the country. I like to call you guys my friends, and we can use all the friends that we can get.
Dovetailing on that,
Go ahead, Shan.
Patrick, there's another quote that we had from the last gathering. It said that we're the ones who talk about community the most, but ironically, we're the ones who enjoy it the least. And that really encapsulates it all. Here we have community, and it's why we endeavor to be here every week.
Let me lean into that for just a little bit, because this is why I wanted to talk with y'all, because we have real conversations. And I think this is stuff that will be helpful for people who are in a church to hear. We're not throwing a pity party. We are big boys and girls. We understand what we're called to. And, but like, man, Dan and Patrick both, like Dan talked about, the challenges we face, and this group really understands those unique challenges of being in ministry. And look, we're not looking for pity, okay? But and then Patrick mentioned the idea that it's really hard for pastors to have friends. And then what Shan just said, that so often pastors, we have a hard time getting community. I want to talk about this for a little bit, because I think this is very real, because I relate to all those. I think, we face challenges. Yeah, I relate to all those. And like, so do you guys agree that, let me say this way, because I think we all can resonate with what Patrick and Dan and Shan have said. Why do you think it's hard for pastors to find relationships, friendships, community in their communities, in their church setting? And by the way, you may not agree with that. And if you don't agree with that, then push back a little bit. But honestly, when I felt like Patrick and Dan and Shan have been reading my emails. That was really real.
Part of it, Aaron, is that I think at least some people in our churches have unrealistic expectations of us and who we are and what life is like for us. So many times when I have spent time with people and real life happens, they say something like, wow, you are a real person. And, it's like, well, what did you expect me to be? So it's, the unrealistic expectations.
It's some ways it's I don't know if you guys ever remember this. Aaron, when you said this, a weird memory from my childhood popped up. I can remember, I think I was either in 3rd or 4th grade, and I was in the grocery store with one of my parents, And I remember seeing my teacher, and my teacher was shopping for groceries, and she was so out of place. I mean, teachers don't shop for groceries. They just stay in the classroom all day long, preparing assignments and grading my tests. That's all that they do. And I think sometimes we superimpose that perspective, or people superimpose that perspective on pastors. The only book they ever read is the Bible, and they read it when they're sleeping. They sleep with the Bible. They never think anything bad. And nobody can ever be as good. All those kinds of really crazy assumptions. And I can. It's one of the reasons why it's funny if you've ever gone to lunch with somebody, and they're nervous about praying at lunchtime. You know, do they say the right thing? Do they say the wrong thing? So it's all those kinds of perspectives.
For me, I was thinking, from my personal side of things, it's fear. I'm afraid of what people will think if I let them in, if they know me, and because I've been burned by that in the past.
Yeah.
You let people in, and it gets used against you, and you just learn it's not safe, and so you don't.
Right.
Yeah, I think that some of it is we know so much of the intimate things about so many people's lives around us, and it has to be guarded at all times. It's to be left confided to us. So having a normal conversation, I'm constantly on guard to not let any of that out. And they begin talking about somebody or a situation, and I'm thinking, oh, if you only knew what was really going on, you wouldn't think that. I can't do anything with that. So I have to just sit on it, and that's very difficult at times.
I was just going to add, to dovetail what was being said before. One of the complexities of being a pastor is that most other professions don't deal with, is there's a level of if I choose to trust the people, my elders, or however your church is structured, your board, if you choose to share with them your struggles and the difficulties that you're going through and your doubts and your pain, that could affect your employment. And that doesn't happen if you're a school teacher or a principal or a surgeon or whatever kind of profession. So there's a uniqueness to this, in that ministers need a safe place to share their humanity. That's what this is.
To say too that it's not just about coming and sharing struggles, but it's also about encouragement as well. That's the other half of it. I mean, I've seen guys reduce to tears on this call, and I've seen guys who think they're at their end of their rope, and immediately all these men come together and they're praying for each other. They're sharing, they're building one another up. We take up offerings and send them out to people. And so it's a fantastic thing to see men come together and be vulnerable, but at the same time, they build each other up. And it's missing in our world. It's missing in our lives. And it's not just something that's it's not just important. I think it's desperately needed for all of us.
And it's also, Nick, as you were talking, the picture that came to mind is that this is a round table, that we have, people from different backgrounds, people who, we have people with a lot of credentials, people who, but here's the deal. No one, it's just a round table, and we have discussions, and no one's sitting at the head. Yes, Joel keeps us on task and keeps us organized, but you're right, Nick. It's like we can come together, we encourage each other. But I like that it's from a perspective of we're all equals. We're all in this together, and we understand. Like it's a cool environment where you don't have to talk with parentheses or asterisks because you're trying to protect your job or you're trying to, make sure that it's safe. It's nice to have this environment where we can just kind of let your guard down and just talk, and it's not going to bite you. It's not going to be something that use the word safe. I think, David, you use your word safe. I think that's really important to understand. And I want, David, I really appreciate your heart and what you shared, because you spoke for all of us. Sometimes I want people who are listening who love their pastor to understand that, yeah, we are afraid sometimes, and we are real people, and it's awfully lonely. That's the craziest thing about ministry, is you can be in front of 1,000 people, but beside your family, you can be really lonely. And does anybody else deal with loneliness? Like the fact that, like, yeah, just like being in a crowded room is not the same as not being alone.
For me, it's an issue. Somebody mentioned this earlier about the fact that you have people are afraid to become close to the minister. What I find is that sometimes people will be close to you, but once you don't give them what they want, you're discarded. And I think this coronavirus has really shown this, because some of us have been accused, you're not spiritual, you're not being a good leader, and every one of us are trying to do the best that we can. But I've had situations even where people are like, "Hey, you're my friend," but then as soon as something doesn't go the way they want it, I'm tossed in the trash can. And I know that this is how it is, but man, I'm telling you, it still hurts when it happens. And it's sad when you say, "Well, I'm used to it." But yeah, it's so lonely at times.
Speaking of COVID and the pandemic and the lockdown, I'm going to ask you a question, guys, and just raise your hand. How many of y'all have dealt with depression on some sort of level during COVID, during Corona? Okay. All right. Probably about, half the hands went up of a group of 25 right now. How many of y'all have had people leave your church during this time? All right. Okay. Hands are up. And these are people we love and care about. What are some of the other challenges that, let me talk about the COVID pandemic and the shutdown, since Jeff brought that up, in light of some of the unique challenges it has brought to ministry. What are some of the unique challenges that you have had to face during COVID, and the lessons you've learned during the past almost a year now, 11 months?
I don't think that I've ever been faced with life or death decisions as in the church, as much as this. And I'm kind of saying that facetiously. I mean, seriously, we really had to sit down and make decisions back in March and April that, when you didn't know this much about what you were dealing with, and with what little we know now. But still, I mean, you were looking at putting people in danger in your place. And that had to be taken with a lot of gravity.
I think also, sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead, Dan.
Just trying to balance, on the one hand, you have those who say, we won't come to church if everybody isn't wearing masks. And then you had a whole other group saying, we won't come to church if we're asked to wear masks. And you have people you love deeply on both sides. And there was no way of finding a balance between those two things.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Dan. We were thinking the same way. I can't recall, insofar as the numbers of people, where there were the extremes. Usually you have a few people that are in the extreme, where you had people that were terrified, and at the same time you had groups of people that were angry, and the volume of anger and the volume of fear that's been really, really hard to deal with. How many people are afraid and how many people are angry, and there's no outlet. There still is no resolution for those things.
And Shan, they direct their anger at you.
That's correct.
Not at the elders, not at other people in the congregation, but at you.
Yeah.
And the truth is, even the ones who are angry are also afraid.
That's true.
Everyone is dealing with fear right now. Anger, by the way, is almost always secondary emotion. Sure. And so when you take and look and really dissect their anger, they're afraid.
One of the things that with COVID, I think that's actually maybe helped a little bit. Anytime a decision is being made above the level of our influence, there's no danger in us spouting off an opinion. So I can say whatever I want about how the governor runs my state because there's no danger in me being right or wrong. If I'm right, great. If I'm wrong, doesn't matter because the decision's happening above my influence. And in our churches, we all were forced to make decisions, and our church folks, a lot of times, they have an opinion, but because the decision is happening above their level of influence, unless they're a key leader or an elder or staff member, there's no real danger in them being wrong. But one of the things I think that has helped with COVID is at least our people maybe have begun to realize a little bit more the gravity of decisions that are being made kind of above their level of influence. In other words, if we get this wrong as a church, it could harm people. And I think that brought that into light practically in ways that perhaps, a budget decision or we're going to help this mission versus that mission kind of conversations don't kind of breed that, if that makes sense.
Yes.
By the way, I want people who are listening, who love their pastor, love their church, to understand what we've just heard. Like, because sometimes, we get the joke, oh, what's it like just to work one day a week? And, our job is just preaching. James mentioned what we feel like during COVID. We've been really keenly aware that some of our decisions are a matter of life and death. Really, seriously, like everybody in this group knows somebody who has COVID, who's had COVID, and probably somebody who passed away. And and Brian, what you just said, like once again, we are not looking for pity. We're not looking for sympathy, but understanding the weight that the men and women who are serving in your church are carrying. Because Brian, like we all were nodding our head when you're talking, because we've been in those meetings where we're making these decisions. And like James said, we are bound by our silence. Like we can't always, defend ourselves. We can't always, explain things that are, part of the decision-making process. But the weight that you guys and we as pastors are carrying, I think is I don't think you can understand unless you kind of walk a mile in our shoes.
Yeah, and I don't think I can recount the number of times that I've been driving or dealing with something heavy at church that many of you guys have already dealt with before, and many times in many ways. And I just go, man, I need to call Shan and ask him a question. Or I need to call, I don't think I've called Aaron and asked him any questions yet, but like I need to call Rick and ask him a question. Or like, I know David's gone through this in life and I haven't. So like, how do I continue not just to have this conversation together, but how do I contact them directly and ask them a question and they help carry the burden and give perspective? Just 2 weeks ago, I did that with Shannon. He gave me some very practical, very helpful advice for a difficult meeting. And that's what we do. We all have the freedom to do that with one another.
I think one of the things that's been really frustrating through this too, is I've had people, and I know you guys have too, that will criticize you for saying, hey, you shouldn't have shut down, or you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. But yet those same people haven't been at church since this all began. My associate was talking to me about this yesterday. It's like, why is so-and-so, why did they get down on you, but yet we haven't seen them? And then just what's real frustrating, our attendance has been bad. Our finances have been great, but the attendance has been bad. We had 26 people in worship in in our contemporary service. We usually have 170. But the funny thing is, and I don't know if you guys feel this, but I'm really fighting anger at times, thinking, wait a minute, I just saw you putting on Facebook, you were at the tattoo parlor, that you were at Walmart, that you were at Target, that you just flew in a plane, that you went on a trip to this place, that you would, and I'm really fighting being resentful. It's like, you can get coronavirus at church, but nowhere else. It's really frustrating. But
let's lean into that a little bit, Jeff, because I think it's important for us to have this conversation. What's the deepest? Let's go deep here, okay? What is in our hearts that makes us want people to be at the church, to have the community, to be a part of the fellowship, to be hearing the messages? What is it in our hearts as pastors that where we get our feelings hurt when they leave, when we miss them when they leave, we're bothered when they get angry at us? Like what is down deep that is the driving factor behind that?
It's the same thing. It's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Who said that? Who said that?
We love them.
Yeah, we do. Go ahead,
We
Stan.
love them.
we love them in the same way that we ache for them when they have personal issues, that we walk with them. Maybe it's only for a few hundred yards. Sometimes it's for 15 miles, but we walk with them and we want them to do well. We want them to be with Jesus. But then suddenly there's this separation, there's this evaporation. What happened? And because we do take it personally, we're weak at times. We make things personal that aren't personal. And is it something that we said? Is it something that we did? And is there a way that we can figure this out? No, we've been ghosted, period. And that's it's more painful than most people realize.
And the hardest thing too is, Shannon, I think, is we would tell other people, you need to put that at the foot of the cross. That's not your burden to carry. This belongs to Jesus, but we are the worst practitioners.
Oh my goodness, we're horrible.
Well, and when you think about it, I don't know, maybe I'm just weird this way. Does this whole situation, we've had people we haven't seen since March of last year, okay? We communicate with them, they're watching online. But does it make you question, why am I doing what I'm doing even when people just seem to not, they'll do everything and anything that they want to do, but they won't come to church. And I don't want people to get sick, don't get me wrong. And I understand all this, but it just makes you question, what impact am I having with these folks? But then I hear something, hey, a person wanted to come to Christ because they heard a broadcast, and you're like, okay, cool. But that's, to me, it's like all the preaching, and a lot of these people I preach, I've been their minister for many years, and it's like, you feel like, have I failed them?
Well, hey, guys, go ahead, Andrew.
I'm worried that we're starting to redefine Christianity as not being together. The nature of our lives is in relationship. God was in the Trinity relationship. Lepers were in relationship. And I hate to give away the idea of being in relationship for virtual. And I'm not saying you can't be in relationship virtually, but it feels like a slippery slope. And I want to say, hey, I want to be safe, but I also want to say, you need to be together. And I have trouble balancing those two, what seems to be extremes.
Yeah. And right. I can't remember where I heard it from, but somebody once told me that crisis is the mother of innovation, right? So when we find ourselves in crisis, we're going to become more innovative. And I think one of the things that even in this conversation that I'm hearing highlighted is this deep desire for us to regain what is missing on a Sunday morning experience, right? That people are coming in. And I think one of the things for me that's pushed me even further is because I have all those same emotions. I miss seeing people on Sunday morning. I wish they were here. But I also have to check myself and understand that some of that missing them is not just because I love them. Not saying I don't, I do deeply, but it's also because I love myself. And I love to have that feeling of validation of this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, that this brings that back, that this is why we have a building and right. All of those things. In reality, my hope is that we are all growing to that place where there's less of ourselves, right? That offering ourselves as that living sacrifice actually means that we give up some of those desires that we have and begin to see what this kingdom would look like. What would it look like if we didn't have these buildings? What would it look like if we weren't able to gather every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. In the same place? And I think we've had to see some of those innovations take place where we can still be the kingdom of God, even if we don't gather in one room together, and that our value and the worth of being a citizen of God's kingdom is more than just showing up at a place. And as a preacher, I've said for years, the church is not this building, but I'm going to tell you guys that at Easter of 2020, I was really, really saddened and depressed and hurting because there were not people inside of my building.
I think that's great stuff, Conrad. You're dropping bombs there, man. I think, Aaron's question about why does it bother us so much when people aren't coming? So I've been a pastor this year 25 years, and in years past before COVID, when a family would come and say, Pastor, we're not going to be here for a while because my son is playing fall baseball, daughter's playing volleyball, soccer, and all their games are on Sundays. I can tell you, like, that would hurt my heart because I know what's going to happen. And I'm your pastor, and I want you to have a growing relationship with Christ. And that is not going to happen when you're sitting at the baseball field watching your kid. And so that hurt, that gives me anxiety for that family, knowing you're separating yourself from the body. The enemy loves separation. He loves jumping on that kind of stuff. So COVID is a very legitimate reason for people not to gather. I also have that same angst as a pastor, knowing if you get used to this, you're not coming back. And I already know what's going to happen to your family because I've been doing this 25 years. I've got 20 examples of people who stepped away and they not only didn't come back, I saw their lives implode because of that very slow fade. So that would be my answer, Aaron, is because I know what's going to happen to you, man. And it's not going to be good.
So right, my question then becomes, so how do we, when we know that that's going to be the case, right? There's families that I know that are going down that track right now because we haven't, their end all be all relationship with the church was Sunday mornings, showing up, right? And if I know that they're going to be on that slippery slope, then what do we do, right? To move them along that into those next steps of their journey of their relationship, because I think what we've seen, we are way over whatever anybody says is the amount of time you need to do something to create a habit, right? We've gotten into the habit of not showing up to church on a Sunday morning. And so what do we do in order to continue a discipleship process, all right, growing us closer? And that's, I don't have the answers, right? That's why I'm struggling, is because that care for people and realizing that the easiest path for them is not there anymore or is not being taken. And so how do we transition and what do we do with that?
Carrie Newhoff in a podcast a while ago, kind of dovetailing on what you said with respect to what crisis is. He says that crisis is a revealer and an accelerator. And everything that we all know as leaders, as preachers, as pastors, we know what's going to happen if they're absent because we've watched what's happened. And in some ways, the acceleration of what's going to happen to the average family, we're seeing in the community of addiction. They haven't had their meetings. They're not able to get with their sponsors, and it's wreaking havoc. And in the same way that it's wreaking havoc in life and death circumstances for the addiction community, it's wreaking havoc for the religious community, the community of faith. And the positive I see on the backside is that after a while, people are going to say, I need to get back. I need to be with my friends. I need to listen. I need to go. And that in some ways, that's already beginning to happen where I'm at. 2 Sundays ago, somebody walked in, I had to come back here. I could not do this anymore. And I think we're going to see that with increasing frequency. That's just the things that I'm seeing.
Brian, you're going to say something?
I was going to go back a statement or two, but one of the things Conrad was talking about was the kind of the feelings and kind of getting back to the original idea of what we'd like people to know, like that aren't in ministry. I think one thing I would just say is I don't know that people, and it's not their fault, I don't know how to do things of other industries because I'm not doing those industries. But one of the things people don't know about our industry or the church is the amount of emotional pain that we have wrapped up in the church or that we receive. And so when somebody comes and tells us, hey, I'm leaving your church or this, that, or the other thing, it is not, for them, it's, I'm no longer going to our church or to the church. For us, there's an incredible amount of emotional pain that gets wrapped up. And part of it's love, part of it's pride, part of it's rejection. I mean, there's lots of emotions. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. I mean, I guess just in my mind, I'm going, Jesus emotionally loved the church enough that he would die for her. So I don't think it's unhealthy to say as pastors, we have an incredible emotion connected to the church that somebody might not have who's just coming. And unfortunately, when you think about what we impress upon our hearts without getting out, somebody comes in and they come into our office and they tell us that, and we've got to sit there and go, hey, well, best of luck to you. While on the inside, we are feeling like we're getting the tar kicked out of us. And perhaps if we're doing our job, the person will never know more. Perhaps maybe they should. I don't know. But I think it's definitely, it's just dovetailing off of what Conrad said.
And part of the other problem with that too is we're so invested into it, and yet if everything falls apart, which I have been in a congregation that did, they just go to other places. We have to get our families up. We have to move our families again. We have to go through the interview process again. And if you're listening on audio, I'm giving it the little asterisk marks on the end there. But we have all of this in our families invested in a place, and we have to change cities. And our hearts are broken over the events, unlike the rest of the congregation where it's an inconvenience and they just do something else.
I like to get you guys' opinion before we, run out of time. But what Conrad said, I don't know what to do because thousands and thousands of churches are going to be dealing with this question kind of, when everything's get back to normal, because a lot of people will not come back. Even really dedicated Christians won't be coming back to church. And we say it all the time. We've said it for years that the church is not a building, but yet, that's where we go to church, right? So I guess my question to you guys, what did the first century church do when they could not gather? I mean, obviously they couldn't just jump in the car. Their work weeks were probably way longer than ours. What did they do? And they didn't really have dedicated churches per se. So what did they do when they couldn't gather?
I was getting ready to say, I think maybe we might be part of the problem to seeing God at work. Acts chapter 8, verse 1 was synonymous with what we faced last March. And that is Saul agrees with the death of Stephen. We take and we look at March and churches being vacated, going into quarantine, and it's a bad thing. Acts chapter 2 and 3 are even worse. Can you imagine being a church leader in Jerusalem and watching people flee Jerusalem, just like people fled the church buildings? I want to remind you, church buildings, the church is people, it's not buildings. And in Acts chapter 8, verses 2 and 3, they fled. But Acts chapter 8, verse 4 is our inspiration. And that is, wherever they went, they preached Christ. I think there's an opportunity here. I truly think God's been waiting for the church to get off its butt. He's been waiting for us to get kicked in the pants and quit being a place you go to and get entertained, and you have a handful of staff that do the job. It's about time the church was preaching the gospel in their homes. And I think I think that could be what's going on with the Holy Spirit right now. We need to start thinking about church differently. Hey, you mentioned Kerry Newhoff. One of the great articles that he had was, don't go back into the church building and think that we go back to the way we used to do things. Let's be innovative. Let's be innovative. I think this is a great time for the church to look a little bit more like the church in China. I think it's a great time for us to look like the church that's being persecuted and they're hunted down and they're underground. That's when the church really grows. Sorry, I'm preaching.
No, and I think we've kind of trained our congregation to come to church to get your stuff figured out. A lot of us could change our own oil in our cars, but we go to the oil change place because it's just easier, right? We could easily wash our cars here at home, but we take it to the car wash, right? And just what Rick is saying is, in the first century church, their church was in their homes. It was in their sons and daughters, and the parents. And when they couldn't get out, they were still in their homes. And I think we've trained our congregates that you come to church, and then we'll give you music, and we'll give you Bible studies. But really, it starts in the home. It starts in the home. I mean,
yeah, Patrick, to kind of go along with that, I was a part of a church at one time where, and I think out of good intentions, right? That question is, what do I need to do to be a good Christian, right? Would be that question that was asked. And so and like anywhere, we try to give easy answers. And I am still saddened by, this is where we came down to at that point. Because what we started telling people is, hey, have an hour of worship and an hour of service and an hour of study a week. And what ended up happening was people would say, I came to Sunday school for an hour, I sat at church for an hour, and I came and, I don't know, maybe passed trays or sang on the worship team or sat in at youth group. And there were my 3 things that you've asked me to do for this week to be a Christian. And that was it for their week of that life, right? And so even when Rick says, man, what did they do? They preached everywhere they went. I don't think it was just a bullhorn and a book being held up. I think it was the way they lived their lives. Everywhere they went, they treated one another differently. They fed each other. They cared for one another. They saw somebody on the side of the road needed help, and they helped. They were different than everybody else, and not just in the fact of where they might spend part of their week, but in the way that they live their life. And I think some of that transition that we're going to have to stress is not coming to a special place on a special day to do those things, but to actually begin to have that infiltrate our life and go on and on. And I think that's why it was so important, right? Where you see that early in the book of Acts, where it says that the believers were meeting daily. Well, that probably wasn't the whole thousands of them, right? Because we see thousands were being baptized in this part, thousands are being baptized in daily. I don't think the whole group of thousands was showing up at Martha's living room. I often say that the city probably would get mad at them for breaking ordinances of parking too many camels in the road, right? It probably was that the way that they lived their life was a way that they wanted to be together, not just on Sunday morning, but that's who became their friends. That's who, and as they reached out and grabbed more people, that group gathered. And then Sunday just got to be that celebration of, look at all these smaller groups that were coming together. And I think if we can transition to that, we can begin seeing some amazing things. Okay, I don't know. That's just me rambling.
No, it's good, dude. So I want to like that. I think Patrick, redirecting us to kind of try to answer your question. What can we do because Andrew, you are so right, man. The community, like people need community. How do we facilitate community moving forward if it looks like we're going to be a hybrid setup? I want to come alongside something Rick said. Man, I feel a conviction to make sure that we're doing something to lean into the home experience, to facilitate the home experience, but without also, to Andrew's point, of losing the importance of gathering as the church, as a community. So what are your ideas as far as like Conrad's basic question of how do we create community? How do we do that? How do we help the body of Christ to be healthy moving forward when we're so disconnected?
There's a great book. Somebody else, actually a Presbyterian minister, put me onto, and it was The Gospel Comes with a House Key. And
what was that again, Rick? Would you say
The Gospel Comes with a House Key.
Okay.
And beautiful book, but a preacher and his wife, they opened up their home, and she just shares just everything they did for opening up their home for the purpose of the gospel, addressing things like community, but also addressing the needs of their neighbors and their friends, and just making an open forum for the gospel. First of all, I'd recommend any one of you read it. It's eye-opening. And the gal who wrote it, her story will maybe encourage you. It's a phenomenal story. So I would recommend you read it.
Yeah, I got one for you guys too. I don't know if you read The Post-Quarantine Church by Tom Rainer. We know him as the church guru. You call Tom and he'll fix your church. But he already has a ton of statistics and information about the quarantine. And of course, it's not even over yet, but it's a really good read as far as what the church is looking like and what it may look like in the coming future. And another one, From Social Media to Social Ministry, by Normal Jones, is another good read for you guys to try to kind of figure out with your staff, what are we going to do? And it's a question. It's going to have to be solved, and we're going to have to try to figure it out.
Hyper spiritualize any kind of a text here, but I do want to point out that when Israel was exiled by Babylon, when the Lord called them back, only 10% of them came back because they became incredibly comfortable where they had established their homes in Babylon. And we may just have to come to terms to accept that and work with the 10%.
I'm trying not to make church attendance be a pride issue. I don't want to fall into that trap, but I want to continue to meet together. And some of that is selfish for my own kids' sake. When I try to do, and I don't know everybody's home church situation, but many of the home churches I'm familiar with are very homogenous, same level of income people, same color people, same age of people. And when I come to the church, you know, my kids are 16 and 18, and they're surrounded by what they consider very old people who talk to them. And we have African-American youth minister, and we have just such a diversity that it actually is great for my kids. It's better than a public education. They learn to do life with different kinds of people. I'm not confident that I can create that at home. And that's probably part of my problem as well. But the last thing I want to do is create an environment that only solidifies our separateness. And the church that I'm serving right now is not monolithic. It's very diverse. It's great for my family, I guess is what I'm saying.
And Andrew, I think that's a great point, right? Of how do we if that's our experience at a place, how does that become our experience in our life, right? And not just this is the place where that becomes, but actually being intentional. And I don't think that's a problem that just our church is dealing with today. I think that's the problem that all of society has, right? I think of my community that we're in. We're kind of off of Lansing, right? So Lansing, being the state capital, is pretty diverse. Our little subdivision, unincorporated community that's off the side of it is 97% white. The school is probably 70% white, but our neighborhoods don't look like what the rest of everything else is. And I think that's an issue maybe even more with us, and I mean us as the church, of let's not just say that's the place that we go and are diverse. How do we incorporate those different types of people, whether it's income levels or races or whatever else, right? Background culturally, into our lives and our daily thing. And I think again, we talk about Acts, which I think we shouldn't apologize, a group of preachers. I think in the book of Acts, we see these different groups of people coming together and not just saying we're part of a church together, actually living together and creating something different, right? And we see that between the Grecian group and the Hellenistic group that began to come together. I'm sorry, the more Jewish group come together and live life despite their cultural differences and backgrounds. And I think, yeah, Andrew, that's a great point. Of some of our churches have done a great job of gathering in different types of people. So now how do we push that outside of those doors of that building?
Can I just say it? I don't think it's possible to be a virtual Christian I mean, I love coming on this every week. Sometimes I ask myself what Aaron started with, and that is, why do I come on here? Because I rarely speak up. I listen 99% of the time, and you're all probably glad for that. But I mean, there's a dynamic that I enjoy. Between Aaron and David and Joel and Marty when he's on. They're funny. You guys make me laugh. And then there's a wisdom that comes across from James and Shan and Brian and all of you. Then there'll be a challenge like Rick gave us just moments ago, that just really stirs you. Or there'll be a story like Angel shared about when he went on his mission trip and how things went crazy, but God worked through all of it in a miraculous way. So, I mean, all of that ministers to me and encourages me and kind of keeps me sane in a world that feels like it's coming apart. But can I tell you honestly, until last January, you guys, except for Joel, were just faces on a screen. And it was okay. But I found lots of excuses to miss because it wasn't as gripping to me as it is now. What made it gripping is when I went out to Colorado with my wife and met you all in person.
Yes.
And saw you and shook your hands and hugged your neck and prayed with you and learned with you and became part of the group. After that, everything has changed for me. And so when I read scriptures like Hebrews 10, 24 and 25, let's consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. And let's not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let's encourage one another. And all the more as you see the day approaching, you can't just do that on Zoom. You have to have contact. You have to be in person and have some fellowship. Maybe not all the time. Maybe Zoom can help and Facebook Live can help. But we can't be virtual Christians. There has to be some way to come together and connect, even if it's in the catacombs. I mean, wherever it is, somehow there has to be touch and personal connection, or it's going to fall apart. What James just said, the 10% that came back and 90% said, nah, not that important to me.
Yeah, Mike, and that is great stuff. And that is, yeah, I hope nobody thought I was saying that we need virtual. My hope is that we do more than what we were doing before. And that is the big thing for me, is that this time has pointed out that we were actually not doing what we needed to be doing. That is why when all of a sudden what we had was no longer there, we lost everything. Right. And so there's got to be this idea, I hope, that whenever we're no longer in this state, whatever we're in now, right? And we're all different, I get that. But when it gets back to the place where we're not worrying about if we could travel or go out to eat or any of those things, do we go back to saying we can fit in 3 hours of our Christian duty on a Sunday morning and go on with the rest of our lives? Or are we being deeper connected? Because like you said, we might have all been faces on the screen until we met together. But my guess is if we thought we could just all show up on a Friday in a room of 1,000 of us and have that same leave with that same feeling that we have, that'd be ridiculous. We have that feeling of brotherhood and working together because of this every week, but because we didn't just go and all sit in the same room together for a couple hours. We ate together, we spent time together, we laughed together, we saw each other's shortcomings together, we prayed together, we cried together, and we did that for days in a row. And that's what we need to see inside of our churches. I don't know how we force grown families to do all those things, right, to build that thing up. And so how do we grasp that? Is, I guess, I'm just agreeing with you, Mike, and saying my hope is that we are spurring one another on, but that this crisis we're in right now has spurred us to say we can do better. Let's do more.
Absolutely, Conrad. And look, God's either in control or he's not. And so if he is, and he is, then he allowed this to occur. And I'm not of the philosophy that the church is always the victim of society, of the world. I believe it's the other way around. I believe God acts upon his church and the rest of the world is affected by it. And so if that is the case, then this occurred because of the church. And I know that's up for debate, but if what we were doing was so right, then why did we falter so hard when it occurred? And what I think we need to look at is everything that y'all are saying is making the adjustments, not to go back to where we were, but to go to something that is built for this. Because people are they're falling off congregations right, left, and center. We hear about it in this group. And so therefore, there was a problem with the way we were rooting people in.
Just as a reminder, Elijah, there's 7,000 who have not bent their knee to Baal. And I think that applies to us now too. The truth is, and I love what Conrad had to say, the truth is the church likely did both. But the church in the United States in the last 100 years did get to kind of a pipeline. Another book that I would recommend is Platform Revolution. But we kind of got content with the big meeting only. But the early church was meeting at the synagogue, or they were meeting at the temple, and they were meeting at homes. And we got content with the synagogue, but we got so to the point where we did not trust the homes. Let's do both. And yeah, we're going to lose people and have likely lost people, but there's 7,000 who have not bent their knee to Baal.
Would chime in as well that I think that whether intentionally or unintentionally, the church has made, we've accepted a shallow form of community that we call attendance. You know, that it's, if you show up on Sunday and are there, then that's good or good enough. And we have a lot of people who may not be the ones coming back because that was their attendance was what they were doing, and they've realized their life really hasn't changed a lot with not attending. And I know Carrie Newhoff points out this a lot, that we need to move from attendance to engagement. And how do we have people be engaged, whether they're in the building or not in the building? And Conrad, you mentioned, like, how do we get people invested, or how do we get people into this kind of life? I think it's just like what we do with presenting the gospel. You know, we live it, we share it, we tell stories about it, we provide opportunities for people to engage in a engaged community with other people where they're sharing meals, sharing time, sharing life. We can't force people into it, but we can continue to present it in a way that shows people, like, hey, there's more to life than just sitting in the pew. And some people will take it and some won't, like the parable of the sower. Not all the seed became good soil. And again, it's not our burden to force people into that community, but to provide the opportunity and to live in a way that shows this is something they would want.
All right, guys. Hey, thank you so much for this discussion. I took a page of notes. And I think, Mike, like I love what you just said about virtual Christians. There are no virtual Christians, and I see a series coming out of that. And hopefully, you who are watching this or listening to this got a glimpse to why we love this so much and why this is such an important thing in our lives each week. And I'm grateful for everybody who's a part of this group and those who are part of this conversation today. As we wrap up, just real quickly, I want to popcorn some answers real quick. What's something that's bringing joy to your journey right now?
Buffalo Bills.
Hopefully by the time this airs, you'll still be feeling joyful.
Yeah, the Saints lost, so that's good.
This may seem lame, but my wife and I are doing a puzzle together. We got it all over the counter, and with just 1,000-piece puzzle of Venice, a place we visited and loved. And so each one of us celebrates when we find one piece that we can slip into place.
It's not lame at all.
I love hearing the kids in our daycare. We've been open for 3 weeks now, and it's just been joy to my heart.
For me, getting back in the office tomorrow, I've been out for a couple of weeks with the coronavirus, so I'm ready to go, get back in the gym and all that good stuff.
I was going to say that too. I think me and about half our staff was out with COVID, and man, I'm so thankful to be back. I'm excited. I think it's lit a fire in me again. I'm pumped. I'm ready to go right now. It's funny how when you're going through something like that, just the excitement that's built when you're back in buildings and back in action here. So
sister in Christ I've been walking with for 19 years came up to me and she said, I just want to tell you how much that I appreciate your teaching throughout the years, how much that it's helped me grow. And that just told me how much I need to do that with other people around me, because of how that was a genuine, that wasn't flattery, that was a compliment. So that gave me great joy to hear that.
Our leaders at my church have really started to focus on teamwork and being there for each other and just doing life together. I mean, I went with one of my elders and just did a trash run, and it facilitated a moment to where we could have some deep conversation. And but it really lifts me up to know that my guys are wanting to have that relationship and really invest in each other. I think it's just fantastic.
Well, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank you guys for your participation, and thank you all for listening. And if you would like more information about the Connect Leadership Network, you'd like to join us. If you're in ministry, if you're a pastor in ministry and you're looking for community, this is an open door. You can find out more information about our network at connectleadership.network. And we'd love for you to check that out. But hey guys, thank you so much. And let me say a word of prayer to close our time together here. God, thank you so much for this time with these incredible leaders. And we thank you for the wisdom. I thank you for the love they have for you, the love they have for their churches. Thank you for this honest conversation about the challenges of being a pastor right now. And God, we are so grateful for you and for conversations like this. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.